Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. We're here today to talk about stress, and I am sure that each and every one of you feels stressed to a certain point in your life. Be prepared to feel more stressful as we talk about stress, because that's what stress does. The mere mention of it can make you tense up. So don't be surprised if you start getting a knot in your stomach and you want to get up and walk around. It is okay. Just come back and listen to the rest, because if you're that stressed, you probably want to hear all of this. So why am I here to talk to you about stress? I know that it's not a surprise to you that lawyers are incredibly stressed individuals. It's part of your profession. Some of your stats, lawyers rank second from the U.S. Department of Labor and Bureau of Statistics in the most stressful professions you can even have. Number 2, I think first responders are number 1. You are, in 2016, you are 11th for suicide, you are 1st for depression, and you're twice as likely as the average citizen to become an alcoholic. All of that is as a result of stress. So why am I here to talk to you about stress? I have a fascination with stress. I was a type A personality, go-to achiever, accelerated at everything I did, really gung-ho, and not really great at coping with stress. I just plowed through it and ignored it. In my late 20s, I had a series of life events. I left a job for the first time and went to a new job. Well, I didn't have a new job lined up. So I left a job for the very first time in my adult life, and I was freaking out. My now husband, then boyfriend, started working the evening shift, so we never saw each other. And then my grandma, who I love dearly, went in for an elective surgery and unexpectedly passed away. And I didn't even know she was going in for the surgery because they didn't want to worry any of us. So those 1, 2, 3 punches, I was watching a movie one night, Rockstar, with Marky Mark, which is not the last movie you want to watch in your life. And I thought I was having a heart attack. My heart started racing, my palms got sweaty, my vision started to blur, my sound, I started hearing whoom, whoom, whoom sounds in my ears, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and I started telling my boyfriend all of my symptoms so he could tell the EMTs when they had to come and get me and take me to the hospital. It turns out I was having the very first of a stress-induced anxiety attack, which, if statistics hold true, 1/3 of everyone watching this video or watching this presentation has had at least once in their life. And usually, if you've had at least one, you've had more than one. Lucky for me, I found someone who helped me learn coping skills, learn how to deal with stress and identify stress, figure out my triggers, figure out how to cope with it. And I'm joyful to say that I have not had a panic attack in 17 years, not to age myself. But that started my fascination with stress. Stress is the single most powerful emotion that we feel on a consistent basis. And the stress that we feel today is 10 times stronger than the stress that our parents felt in their lives. But we haven't learned better coping skills. We just plow through and keep going. So today, we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about good stress versus bad stress. We're going to talk about the personal impact stress has on you. We're going to talk about the professional impact stress has on you. And I'm going to go through that part pretty quickly because I want to get to the really good stuff in this presentation, which are the solutions and the tips for combating stress in your life. So we're going to talk about combating stress mentally, physically, and in the workplace, which is most important for you guys. So let's first talk about good stress versus bad stress, because there is a difference, right? Stress keeps us motivated. It helps us reach challenges. There's a certain amount of stress that was good for you when you went to college and then you went to law school and then you had to pass the bar exam and then you had to sit for all your interviews. All of that can be really positive and excellent stress. So when does stress become bad for us? When is that tipping point? And what studies have found is there's a great comfort zone of stress where it actually makes you better and more you. And then there's a fatigue point. And you can see on this graph, the fatigue is right at the peak of the bell curve. If you keep pushing past that point, you're going to crash. And good stress becomes bad. And that's when you get to burnout if you don't stop. And most people, particularly lawyers, don't know when to stop. So we go straight past that fatigue point, keep pushing, and get all the way to burnout before it's too late. So here's what happens when we get stressed out. It's really the hormones and the limbic system in our body. We see a trigger, and we decide if we're going to flee or fight, and our body is flooded with hormones, usually cortisol, stress hormone. and our breathing gets shallower and faster. Our palms start to sweat. All of our blood leaves our extremities and pools into the center of our body so we can fight or flee. Heart rate increases, respiration increases, pupils dilate. Your hair will start to stand up. The interesting thing to me is I could be describing stress or I could be describing excitement because they have the exact same physiological response in the body, exactly the same. The only difference is how we interpret it. Do we decide it's excitement or we decide it's stress? All of those things are great. It gives us a boost, it gives us energy, we get ready to flee. The problem comes with, after that, you're supposed to relax. Your body's supposed to go back to normal. Your hormones are supposed to regulate, your heart rate's supposed to lower, your muscles are supposed to relax and untense, and you're supposed to have a respite. But we don't do that. We go from stressor to stressor, and so what happens is our body gets in a state of chronic stress, and that's when stress has a major impact on us. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about stress, but while I talk about stress, those of you that got the memo, you took 2 tests for me before this presentation. The first is the Holmes-Rahe test. If you could, go ahead and share your results with us while I talk about what this test was. Holmes and Rahe were 2 psychologists, and they were trying to determine how to figure out how stressed a person was. And the only way they could figure it out was to figure out stressful life events that impacted people, both positively and negatively, because remember, stress can be either good or bad, and rank them in terms of a point system and add them up. And here's what they found. Depending on your results number, it impacted how likely you were to get sick, have a major illness, or have an accident in the next year, just based on this number, based on the stressful life events that you've had in your life. So here's what he found out. For those of you who had between 11 and 150 points, you're pretty stress-free in terms of things that are happening in your life. You're pretty good. You don't really have to worry. Those of you that are 151 to 299, you're creeping up there. You are much more likely to have an accident, to have a major illness, or to have sick days, an increase in sick days in this next year. And if you are 300 points or more, and when I first took this test, I was a whopping 459 points. Not great for a coach who talks to people about stress. If you are 300 points or above, you're in the danger zone. You really need to think about the things that you're going to do in the next few months. And if you have another stressful event coming up, if you can push it, maybe now's not the time to buy the house, or not the time to make the move, or not the time to have the baby unless you're already pregnant, and then you don't really have the choice. So what are the results?
We have 46.6% fell between 11 and 150 points. 36.8% fell between 151 and 299 points. 16.6% were 300 points or greater.
Okay, so that 16%, don't panic. Just recognize that you have a lot of factors in your life that are incredibly stressful. So it's really important for the folks who are 151 and above to really enhance your coping skills and recognize how you handle stress and see if there are some tips from today that you can incorporate in your life to reduce your overall stress. The tricky thing is, this is not the only way to tell how stressed you are, because this just tells how many stressful events you have in life. So I created a test while working with 3 other doctors, and we came up with a way to tell how stress is actually impacting your body. So this is not so much how much stress you have in your life, but how much is that stress impacting you and affecting you. So that is the Williams Physical Stress Test, which is the second question that we have. If you can go ahead and input your results if you took the time to take that test, and I will tell you what that means. So if you're under 5 points, which is where we all want to be, you probably don't need the rest of this workshop, but you should still hang out and get your credit. You are a total Zen master, and you handle stress incredibly well. And you can probably give me some tips for handling stress, and I am happy to take them, so reach out and share them with me. If you have between 6 and 25 points, you have minimal to moderate stress. At times, you may slip into the bad stress zone, but you usually catch yourself and you get back into, you don't tend to stay there very long. If you have 25 to 49 points, stress is starting to affect your daily life. And now is the time to really actively reduce it. And if you're 50 plus points, you're pretty much on a direct path to burnout if you don't make a change. So change needs to be made pretty much immediately. And so hopefully you can implement some of the things that we're going to talk about right now. Because the impacts of stress on a body are insane. It is everything from an increase to heart risk, an increase to stroke, an increase in diabetes, an increase of your weight, a loss of your libido, a loss of your hair, skin issues, dietary issues, digestive issues. Chronic stress actually even reduces gray brain matter. That's how impactful stress can be on our life. So let's see where you guys are at coping with your stress and how your stress levels are in terms of the Williams physical stress test.
9% came in under 5 points.
Good job, you guys. I'm impressed.
52.5% were between 6 and 25 points. 30.7% of those who took this fell between 25 and 49 points. 7.8% were 50 points or greater.
Okay, so it must be the Great Pacific Northwest that keeps you calm and less stressed, because those numbers are significantly lower than when I talk to other bar associations. In fact, it's usually about 50%, 50 to 60% are highly stressed and panicking. So good job, but still stick around and listen. So now we're going to talk, now that you know how stressed you are, how the stressors, the level of stress that you have in your life and how you deal with it, what we're going to talk about now is what you can shift to increase your coping skills, to better handle stress, to let it roll off your back, or to accommodate your life in a way that the stress does not impact you negatively. Because remember, we want a certain amount of stress. Stress keeps us moving and going. Stress is what gives us the challenges and makes us succeed. We just don't want it to be detrimental to life. And so many of us have slipped past that point to where it really gets in our way. I'm really good with the slides, by the way. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the tips and strategies to combat stress. We're going to talk about mental stress. We're going to talk about physical stress, and we're going to talk about stress in the workplace. But first, we're going to talk about mental stress, because it all starts in our mind, and our mind is a powerful tool for us. So when we talk about mental stress, we're going to talk about mindset, positivity ratio, and also shifting our thoughts to actions. So let's first talk about mindset. And I know you guys have heard this term because it's a buzzword right now. It is everywhere, and everybody says they know what it means. Let me tell you what it doesn't mean. Mindset doesn't mean you're a positive person. It's not a glass half full kind of attitude, although that fits into it. When I, as a coach, talk about mindset, what I mean is growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And that is your perspective on life, how you approach things, how you approach challenges and people and new things. So a fixed mindset really believes at its core that the traits and the characteristics you are born with are what you have, and no matter what you do, you're not going to make it better. A growth mindset really believes that with effort and hard work and excitement and passion, you can pretty much learn anything within reason. So a growth mindset, when they come across a challenge, will tend to avoid a challenge, because a challenge they will take personally if they fail. So if they look at a challenge and they go, I can't succeed at that, or I don't know if I can succeed at that, I better avoid it, because if I fail, I'm a failure. A growth mindset gets really excited and embraces a challenge, because with their attitude, they look at it and they say, I might achieve it, and even if I don't, I'm going to learn something valuable so I can achieve it the next time. So they're a little bit more resilient. When they come across obstacles, a fixed mindset will come across multiple obstacles and they'll stop. They'll just give up. A growth mindset will keep trying new strategies and keep going until they achieve it. When it comes to effort, a fixed mindset views effort as something disdainful. If you have to work hard, then you're clearly not great at it. Where a growth mindset really embraces hard work and effort, because they know that they're using their tools and their skills, and they're growing stronger and they're growing greater in this process. So they really look for challenges that require hard work and effort. It's a good thing and not a bad thing. When it comes to criticism, fixed mindset does not like criticism because any criticism or feedback is an attack on who they are as an individual, where growth mindset embraces it because it's a chance to grow and get better. And then finally, when it comes to levels of success, a fixed mindset can be a very successful person. That's the important thing to remember. They can be very successful. It is just that they will hit a ceiling that they cannot get past unless they shift their mindset. Whereas a growth mindset individual doesn't have a ceiling. It's constantly growing with them. So the best example I can give you of fixed versus growth is a story of preschoolers. And they took a study of preschoolers and they put half of them in a fixed mindset and half of them in a growth mindset. And you can simply do that with the questions that you ask them or the way you phrase the rules and parameters. You can shift them into growth or fixed. And then they gave them a really hard puzzle to do. And after the puzzle, they came back in. And what they found was the fixed mindset and the growth mindset children had the same amount of pleasure with the puzzle, but the growth mindset children worked on it twice as long. The fixed mindset children gave up. And then when the study host came back in and said, great job, now we're going to give you a second harder puzzle. What do you think the fixed mindset children said? One of them said, oh, no, don't worry, I have these at home, I can practice them there. The other one said, no, I'm good. I don't ever need to use puzzles in my life. So some of them lied to get out of doing a second puzzle because in their brain, they thought they couldn't be more successful than they already were. It was hard, and they weren't going to get it, so they quit. The growth mindset kids, one of these little 4-year-olds said, oh, great, I was hoping to be challenged today. One of them asked if they could get the names of the puzzle so they could have their parents buy the puzzle so they could practice more at home. Think about this in terms of our professional adult world. Which of those mindsets do you think is going to be more successful and more sustainable in the long term? Which do you think is going to have more fulfillment and happiness? And which do you think it's just more fun to be? The person that's always limiting and stopping themselves and giving up? Or the person that looks at challenges as an exciting learning aspect of life and doesn't take it personally, just keeps going? So there are some things that we can do to shift our mindset. And here's what I'd like you to recognize. We are not ever fully growth or fully fixed. We kind of fluctuate given different situations in our life. Like public speaking, I'm insanely a growth mindset. Math, I'm incredibly fixed. You will hear me say things like, oh, I'm not really a math person. Now, that is something for me to be aware of because in order to change my mindset, I have to recognize where I'm fixed and where I'm growth and decide if where I'm fixed is getting in my way and I want to make the effort to change it. So the first thing is just be aware and actively decide where you want to be growth instead of fixed. The second step is to identify and acknowledge triggers. For me, clearly, math is a trigger. So I have to really shift my language to myself when I talk about math. When I catch myself saying, I'm not really a math person, I could simply say, I'm not a math person yet. Or, I've chosen not to focus on making myself a math person, but if I wanted to, I could be, right? It's just a shift in your attitude and perspective and how you talk to yourself about it. If you are going to go into trial and you say to yourself, oh man, I am really horrible in front of the judge. Well, clearly you should have picked a different field. But if you're there and you're worried about how you're going to perform in front of the judge, what do you think is going to happen? Versus if you go, I'm going to do my best, and no matter what happens, I'm going to be better the next time. It shifts your focus, it shifts your stress level, and it shifts your mindset. All right. The other thing for shifting your mindset, changing it, is to actively focus on things that you can choose and challenge. So maybe I just want to focus on changing my math mindset first. Maybe that's where I want to make a difference. So maybe I challenge myself to do a math problem every day. Or maybe I hop on lynda.com and take a math class or the Khan Academy and start learning math. Or maybe I start looking for situations in life where I can enhance my math skills and get excited about it. And then I take growth action, which is the fourth step. I actively challenge myself to take that action and get better at it. So you can do this, and it doesn't have to be with the law. You can do this with something as simple as trying something new that you haven't tried before that you don't know if you can succeed at, putting yourself in a growth mindset and saying it is the attempt that is important, it's the effort that's important, I'm going to try this, and if I don't succeed this time, I'll be better next time, which means you have to try a second time, but it's okay, and see how that shifts your attitude and perspective, and also the level of fulfillment or joy or passion that you have while you're doing it. Because when we are doing something and we tell ourselves it's going to be hard and we tell ourselves we're not going to make it, we don't enjoy it. And we don't do the things that we enjoy very often unless we have to. So start tricking yourself a little bit, convincing yourself that even if you don't succeed, there is something to be gained from this and it's worth trying. All right. So the second part of the mental part of stress is talking about the positivity ratio. The positivity ratio is a tipping point of positivity in life. And I do not mean compliments versus negative comments. When I talk about positivity in life, I mean emotions, negative emotions versus positive emotions. And there is a woman named Barbara Fredrickson who is the queen of positive psychology. She has an amazing book out called Positivity, which I've read multiple times if you ever want to read more on this subject. And what she has figured out is there's a tipping point, a ratio of positive versus negative. And if you hit this tipping point or higher, you kind of flow into a thriving area of life where, if you've ever been in that situation where things get easier, they just start to flow, you can't do anything wrong, everything's going and humming, and you're in that zone, that is the flourishing zone. And that is when you feel at least 3 positive emotions for every negative emotion you feel. And once you're in that zone, you just spiral upward. Things get easier and more symbiotic, and success becomes easier. Now, conversely, if you are under a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative, you start to spiral downward. And you know you've been in this situation when you're giving it your all and it's seeming to take more energy than it should, and you're not making progress like you feel like you should, and things just seem to be really hard and frustrating, and it doesn't get any better. Like, the more effort and the more energy and the more time you put into it, it seems to get worse. Because what happens is if you're under that 3-to-1 ratio, you will actively spiral downward. And studies have shown that if you hit 1-to-1, usually you are clinically depressed. So this is really great, Carrie, but what the heck does that mean? Well, if you were in the room, I would poll you and see how many of you could come up with negative emotions right now. And it is insane how many people can come up with 3 or 4 negative emotions that they can share with me. So just brainstorm them out loud. I know you're alone in a room, but just brainstorm them out loud and see how many you can come up with that are negative emotions. And I will share with you the top 10. Anger, shame, contempt, disgust, embarrassment, guilt, hate, sadness, fear, and stress. And the interesting thing about negative emotions is when you think about them, there is a physicality and an actual physiological response that combines with each one. So if you feel shame, you lower your head. That's a universal symbol for shame. When people are feeling shameful, that's what they do. If you feel disgust, usually you pull back, your shoulders go up, and you go, ugh. That's a universal symbol. You can read faces in any culture, and they have the same response to those negative emotions. Now let's see if we can come up with any of the positive emotions. People struggle a little bit more with this. Psychologists have said that even though there are massive amounts of positive emotions, there's really only 10 that count, and all the rest can fold into these 10. So in your room, see how many positive emotions you can shout out right now. I'm going to guess it's less than the negatives. And now I will share them with you. Joy is number 1. Gratitude, serenity, which is that contentment and calmness. Interest, hope, pride, not ego, just pride. Amusement, inspiration, awe, and love. Psychologists say that all other positive emotions can be funneled into one of these 10. So here's the trick. Can you feel joy 3 times for every time you feel anger? Or can you feel hope and pride and amusement every time you feel guilt? The tricky part is our minds are wired to cling to the negative. So when we feel that negative emotion, we usually repeat it over and over in our brain, and so we don't just feel that negative emotion once, we feel it multiple times. So think about how much we need to add positivity to balance that out. And how do we do that? Well, here's the tips to increasing positivity. Spend time in nature. We know that spending time in nature reduces your cortisol and increases your serotonin. So it reduces your stress hormones and increases your happy hormones. It is a positive thing, and you are feeling positivity on multiple levels. Physically, emotionally, through sight, through sound. Unless you have insane allergies, and then maybe spending time in nature is not what you want to do. Start a daily gratitude journal. At the end of the evening, write down 3 things that you are grateful for. Here's why. It shifts you to remember the things that you're grateful for and focus on that instead of the things that you're upset about or not. You don't want more of in your life. Most of us focus on the things that we want to change. We don't tend to focus on the things that we are ecstatically happy with. So this just helps you focus on the things that are already great in your life instead of what's not so great in your life. You can also do a daily anticipation list. In the morning, write down 3 things that you're looking forward to in your day, 3 things that excite you, 3 things that you just can't wait to make happen. And if there aren't 3 things, figure out 3 things and put them in your calendar, because that's going to say a lot. If you can't find 3 things that you're looking forward to in a day, what's the point of looking forward to the day? What's the point of getting through that day? We are primed to look for things that excite us, that make us feel whole, that make us feel passionate, that fulfill us. And if your calendar is full of nothing but work and drudgery and things that you feel like you have to do instead of what you want to do, then you need to put some anticipation into your life. For me, Christmas Eve is so much better than Christmas Day, right? Because the possibilities are limitless. Who knows what's under that tree or in that stocking? You can also learn and apply your strengths. When I talk as a coach, when I talk about strengths as a coach, I don't mean what are you good at. I mean, what are you good at and you love doing it. And that's kind of a novel concept for most people because we've been trained to think of a strength as just simply what are we good at. But I don't want you to have more of the things that you're good at if you don't love doing them. That's counterintuitive and it doesn't help us reduce your stress, right? It just adds more to your to-do list. So really take a minute and think about what it is you love doing and you're really good at it. Because what we found in studies is the more you use your strengths, the more positivity you feel, the more positive emotion you feel, and the more you start to spiral upward just from using your strength. I went to a public speaking event and listened to a famous author talk, and he shared a novel concept. He said, most people work on their weaknesses and try and bring them up, right? We know what we're really bad at, what we suck at, where we're below standard. And so we spend all our time focusing on that and trying to bring it up to average because we have the belief that we need to be well-rounded. And he said that maybe we don't. He told a story about a soccer player who, I don't really follow soccer, so I don't remember his name. But as a little kid, a team sponsored him and put him in school. And he had the best left foot in the world as a kid. Like, he was amazing with his left foot. Not so great with his right. So all his coaches started working him on his right foot, doing drills, doing practices, working on the right foot, working on the right foot, working on the right foot. And what happened was, this kid who loved soccer, lived soccer, his entire life was soccer, started to hate soccer. Because all he was focusing on in soccer was where he was not good, was where he was not successful, was where he was below average and where he was failing. And so he started to hate the process, and he started to lose his love of soccer. And the people who had invested at this point thousands of dollars in his training started to panic because they were about to lose a potential great player because they weren't coaching him properly, and they didn't know what to do. And finally a coach came in and said, you know what? Forget everything we've been talking about. You have the best left foot here. Your left foot's amazing. Let's see if we can make it even better. Forget about your right foot. Let's give you the very best left foot in the entire world. And so the kid started practicing again, and he became amazing. And he does. He has the best left foot in the league. His right foot, his right side's weak, and everybody knows his right side's weak. But here's the problem. It doesn't matter because his left foot dominates so much that no one can get it to the right side to get it away from him. So he's an amazingly successful and dominant player by focusing on his strengths. And also, he is more fulfilled and passionate by focusing on his strengths. So take some time to identify some of your weaknesses that you've been really focusing on and ask yourself, how important is it to bring that weakness up to average? Because we are not programmed to strive for average, right? That's not an exciting goal. Why are you going to spend all of your energy trying to be average in a category when you could focus on being really amazingly successful in an area that you love? So that's what I say is learn and apply your strengths. Spend some time every day doing something that you're good at and something that you love, and inspire yourself in that way. You could also create a wall of positivity. I've had clients that do this, and it's pretty amazing to see. I had one client who, every time she reached a goal, she put a butterfly on her wall because she loved butterflies. And by the end of our 6 months of working together, she had an entire wall full of butterflies. And she said, Carrie, it is so amazing and inspiring. Every time I look at that wall, I feel amazing because I know that I did that. That's how many things I accomplished. We do the same thing with kids with gold stars and happy faces, right? We put it on their papers. We should do that for ourselves too. But it should be a visual reminder of how far you've come or how much you've grown or how much effort you've put in, and not a reminder of how far you still have to go, right? Revisit past positive situations that you've done before and praise yourself. Acknowledge what you did properly, what you did right, and praise yourself for that, and then see if you can repeat it. Because we usually already know the answer, we just don't always remember it in the moment. And finally, if you can't do anything else to increase your positivity, you can give yourself a big positive jump just by reducing or avoiding negative situations. If there's situations where you're incredibly triggered to negative thoughts, if there's a person who always makes you feel 15 negative emotions and never a positive emotion, if you can, spend less time with that person. If you know that every time you call your mother-in-law, you have a negative spiral downward because it's not fun, don't call her so often. We are the sum of the 7 people we spend the most time with. And that is true in terms of success and income, and it's also true in terms of positivity. So if you are around positive people who make you feel positive and who share that positivity, you will spiral upward with them. You will lift them up and they will lift you up. But if you're around negative people, you will start to spiral downward. So let's talk about the third aspect of mental stress. And that is my favorite part as a coach. I get really excited about this. It's a little bit of philosophy, which I know you all studied in school. It is Immanuel Kant. It is shifting thoughts and actions. So he had this theory that if you see the tiger, then you think you're in danger, so then you feel afraid, and then you run. So in his theory, I see the tiger as the trigger. I think I'm in danger is the thought. I feel afraid is the emotion, and so I run is the action. What he is saying is the trigger comes first. The thought spurs the emotion, and the emotion spurs the action. And this is really interesting to me because when we try to change a habit, what do? We focus on the action, just the action. We're like, I'm going to change the action, and if I do it 21 days in a row, I'll have a new habit, and everything will be great. I am sad to say that is not necessarily true, that what they're hoping they will do in those 21 days is shift the thought, which will make the new action a new habit. So we need to shift the thought first. And here's an example of this. I gave this workshop, the very first time I gave this workshop was in California, and I had a lady say, Carrie, I can't do this. I can't shift my thoughts. It's too hard. And I said, well, let's work it out. Let's see if we can. And she said, here's the scenario. I am co-counseling with this lawyer who I don't really appreciate, and he makes me feel horrible every time we work together. He puts me down. He tells me what I'm doing wrong. He pretty much just humiliates me, and I just want to leave the case. I want to stop. I don't want to spend time with him. I don't want to do anything. How do I change that? And I said, well, that's really interesting. So we explored. We tried to figure out what we thought that he was trying to do by putting her down. Was it malicious towards her? Did he not like her? And she said, no, I think he's just trying to make himself feel stronger and more powerful and better. And I said, oh, okay. So when he's putting you down, it's because he's feeling insecure. And she's like, well, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, He's probably trying to give himself a boost and make himself feel powerful and smart. I said, oh, so he's like a little kid then who's feeling insecure and needs attention. And she's like, yeah. I said, all right. I said, so if we look at this, the trigger is this gentleman. Your thought is he is picking on me or he's being unfair. And so then you feel upset and frustrated and your action is you want to run. She said, yeah, that's right. I said, great. What do you want your action to be? She said, honestly, I want my action to be that I double down and I do great work for my client. I said, great. I said, how do you have to feel in order to double down and do great work for your client? And it took her a minute. She said, I have to feel calm. I have to feel confident. And it's pretty much impossible, but if I can feel a little lighthearted, that really helps me. And I said, all right. So you want to feel calm, confident, and lighthearted, because when you feel that way, you can feel calm and confident and do your best work for your client. She's like, yeah. I said, okay. So your trigger is still this man. What is the thought that you need to think in order to feel calm and confident? And this one really stumped her. She struggled with it for a really long time, and I had other members of the audience trying to help her out. But here's what we came up with. She said, you know, he really is like a little kid when he wants this attention, and it's almost like a little baby. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, so what if when he does that action, instead of thinking, oh, he's attacking me and he's picking on me, you go, oh, poor baby, he needs some attention. And what if we take it a step further? And she's like, oh, okay, what? I said, what if we picture him in a diaper with a pacifier and a bonnet? And she was like, she burst out laughing. She's like, I can't do that. And I said, just try it out. It feels weird, but next time he does anything to you, I want you to, in your brain, say, oh, poor baby, he just needs some attention, and picture him that way. I said, I guarantee that you're not going to feel threatened and you're not going to feel attacked. I said, you're probably going to feel calm and confident and a little lighthearted. And she called me the next day. She was like, Carrie, I thought it was not going to work, but it worked. I shifted the thought that I had in my brain from the trigger, and it shifted my action. She's like, and I'm confident, and I'm calm, and I'm able to do my work really well. So you can essentially shift any action that you have if you can identify the emotion, and then identify the thought that you are currently having that is triggering that emotion, and then shifting that thought. And if you can't do it alone, a coach can really help you with this, but it is impressive how many aspects of your life you can change this mental stress, because it is the thought that you are thinking that is giving you mental stress. You are the only one that can change that thought. But once you do change that thought, it has major impact on your life. All right, so we have covered the mental stress so far, and now we're going to move on to physical stress, when it starts to manifest in our body. The first thing that I work with my clients on when we talk about physical stress is, what do you think it is? It's sleep. I didn't make this a poll question, but I'm curious, think in your mind, how many of you get more than 8 hours of sleep a night? And how many of you get between 7 and 8 hours of sleep a night? And how many of you get less than 7? Because here's what studies show. Studies show that 90% of us need 8 hours of sleep a night. 90% of us. 5% of us need more, and 5% of us need less. The average American gets less than 6.5 hours of sleep a night. So what does that tell you? It tells you that you're already starting behind the race. It's like the starting gun went off and you're starting 5 minutes later. Because when you do not get a full night's sleep, when you are not fully functioning in the morning, your decision-making process is impaired and slowed down, your productivity is impaired and slowed down, your response to stress is lowered, so stress has a higher impact on your life, your communication skills go down. So it's like you're trying to play poker with half a deck, and you still expect to win. So I talk a lot about self-care with my clients, and I would like you to know one thing. Self-care is not the same thing as selfish. Self-care is decisions that you make about your personal health and well-being that will make you more successful, more productive, and better for you and your family and your employers. Many of us think, oh, I can't go to the gym because I have to do something else for my family. It's selfish if I take me time. That is not you time. That is health time. Or we think, oh, I don't have time to go for a walk in nature, which we know raises your positivity, because I should be doing this instead. We need to schedule in self-care into our calendars, and we need to make it a priority. It shouldn't be an afterthought, and it shouldn't be bonus time, and it shouldn't be selfish time. To be as successful as you can be, to function as well as you can function, to be as efficient as you can be, you have to take care of your physical self. And that means getting the right amount of sleep. You can set up a nighttime ritual to help you fall asleep. Mine involves a bath every night and then reading of a 5-minute book, 5 minutes of a book. And then I know people that have certain smells that they like to fall asleep to, or certain rituals that they like to have, sleepy time tea, whatever it is, set up a nighttime ritual, schedule sleep. I know that my clients who practice the law, it kind of kills me because one of my questions when we have a session is, what time did you go to bed last night? And they're usually like, well, I stopped working at 1, but then I had to do laundry. And I'm like, so sleep is not a priority. Your health and well-being needs to be a priority, as much of a priority as your career, because without your health and well-being, you will not have a career. Even if you have one right now, without your health and well-being, you are on the path to burnout. And your profession is the number one burnout profession of any of them. The majority of my lawyer clients, when they walk in the door and they go, Carrie, I need to leave the law. You need to help me find my next career because I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And I've had that happen to people who have been in the law for 30 years, and I've had that happen to people who have been in the law for 2 years. You spend a lot of time and energy studying this practice, going to school for this practice, and building this career for yourself. And it would be a shame to have to leave it just because you can't cope with the stress that it brings. Ideally, we'll change the amount of stress that it brings. Ideally, we would change the culture of the law and make it a little more inclusive of health and well-being. But until that happens, you have to be the outlier. You have to take care of yourself first. There's a reason on the airplane that they say, in case of an emergency, put your own mask on first and then the person next to you. Because you can't, if you don't take care of yourself, you're essentially expecting other people to take care of you. So let's take care of you first. So sleep, set up a sleep ritual. Sleep should be like an appointment. It should be sacrosanct for you. Nothing should get in the way except emergency. Then work on nutrition. I don't care what food program you follow. Ideally, eat healthily. Don't eat more than you need to. Don't eat less than you need to. Food is very individual for the person. I don't care if you're gluten-free or vegan or keto. Whatever works for you. Just make sure it is the healthy choice for you and that you're getting the sustenance you need to fully function at your best. Exercise. We know that exercise increases serotonin and dopamine in the brain. Those are both positive hormones. It reduces cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So even if you only have 10 minutes, exercise for 10 minutes. If you have a stressful client about to come in, get up and do 5 minutes of yoga before they walk in, or 10 jumping jacks. Get your heart running and racing, and get yourself out of your brain and into your body. Because even 10 minutes a day will make a difference. Ideally, we want 30 minutes a day. And if we were working together, I'd get you to that 30 minutes a day, but most of us are like, Carrie, I don't have that time. But exercise is key for self-care. And then the interesting thing is, personal connections are key for self-care. Our interactions with other humans, whether it be family, friends, romantic relationships, colleagues. So spend some time every day nurturing one of those connections or relationships. Having some, I was going to say intercourse, but I didn't mean it in the dirty way. Having some intercourse with your colleagues so that you are connecting on a human level. It will raise your positivity, and it's part of self-care. Now we're going to move on, because after self-care, you go, great, Carrie, I'm sleeping enough, and I'm still stressed out. What's the next step? The next step is mindfulness. and this is another buzzword, so I'm sure that you've all heard of it, and I bet there's one or two mindfulness experts out there, because there tends to be in every workshop where they're completely zen and they're like, I meditate for half an hour a day and I do yoga every day, and I want to be you. I strive to be like you. But what mindfulness is focusing on the present moment instead of worrying about the past or stressing about the future. It's just being right here, right now, and that is all. That is really difficult to do in our busy lives when every moment is scheduled and we don't have enough time to accomplish half of the things on our to-do list in a day. But there are some massive benefits to it. Practicing mindfulness increases serotonin, the good hormone. It increases dopamine. It increases your endorphins, which lifts your mood. So what they found is that somebody who practices just 5 minutes of mindfulness a day can double their mood boost. 5 minutes, guys. It decreases pain intensity by up to 40%. So if you go to a pain clinic, one of the things they practice is mindfulness because it will actually reduce your pain level. It also reduces anxiety levels by up to 22%. And again, guys, this is just 5 to 10 minutes a day. This isn't making this your entire life. So here are some practices of mindfulness. There is mindful breathing. There's the most popular one, which everybody knows about, meditation. There's yoga, because yoga incorporates meditation. There is Tai Chi. Normally, if I had you in the room with me, we would practice one or more of these. They're a little hard to practice when you're not here, but I figured that we can practice the mindful breathing if you're all willing to take this leap with me. So, close your eyes right now. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to put our feet flat on the ground. So if you're sitting cross-legged, just sit flat on the ground, sit really settled, calm and comfortable. Close your eyes, and what we're going to do is all breathe in through our nose together, and we're going to count to 4 in our brain. Then we're going to hold it for 4 seconds. We're going to breathe out through our nose for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds. So in 4, hold 4, out 4, hold 4. And we're going to do that 4 times. So those of you watching me, I'm going to do it too, so don't laugh. All right, close your eyes, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3. Breathe in and hold. Breathe out and hold. Breathe in and hold. Breathe out and hold. Okay, so I shortened it because it felt like a really long time just standing up counting at this podium. We did that 3 times. If you do that 4 times, you will reduce your stress levels by 10% pretty much immediately. You will start to boost your serotonin and your dopamines and your endorphins just by focusing on breathing and nothing else. Meditation is great, but for some, meditation is really hard because it's trying to clear your mind and just focus on breath. And I find that if I'm counting and really focusing on my breath, I can't think about other things at the same time. So if you get the chance today or tomorrow or anytime you're feeling incredibly stressed, see if you could take a minute and just practice. They call it box breathing. Breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4. If we were here in the room together, we'd do some meditation or some yoga, but I'm not going to make you do that in front of your computers. So here's what we know. Meditation will decrease your blood pressure. Meditation will increase your serotonin and your dopamine and your mood. It reduces stress and also inflammation, like asthma and allergies. It reduces the pain from arthritis. It slows down the progress of Alzheimer's. They're now starting to practice meditation and mindfulness in old folks' homes with dementia patients because they're finding that it really helps. It curbs tobacco cravings. I know quick coaches that use mindfulness when they're helping people stop smoking. And it has been just as effective as antidepressants in treating anxiety symptoms. Not true depression symptoms, but anxiety symptoms, mindfulness has shown to be just as effective as drugs. That's pretty impressive. So if anything can get you to breathe mindfully, maybe that can, right? The idea that if I spend 5 minutes a day just focusing on these 5 minutes, it's going to make me more productive and successful for the rest of my day. All right, so that is the physical part, reducing physical stress. There are other tips and practices as well that you can do, stretching, anything that puts you in the moment and in a physical activity, even actually being part of a basketball league or a soccer league or a baseball league will reduce your stress because it's combining multiple things. You have to be in the moment and it's physical activity. Now let's talk about stress in the workplace because the majority of us, that's where we feel it the most, particularly people who have more clients than they know what to do with, or they have to bill more hours than they think they can, which you guys fit the bill. So when I talk to people about reducing stress in work, I really focus on the 3 8s. And I think it's funny because it's 3 8s, but it's 3 8s, ATES. Those 3 8s are automate, delegate, and separate. So let's talk about automating first. What do I mean when I talk about automating? In your given work week, there are things that you do more than once, and there are things that you dedicate time to every week. If you're spending more than 10 minutes a day or an hour a week on the same task, usually you can find a way to automate it. Automating it is just setting up a system of plans, processes, or procedures so that you don't have to think, you can just execute. So it could be as simple as having a template that you use where you just change names and details. Or it could be an intake process, or it could be an onboard training process. It is any situation where you don't want to have to rethink the wheel over and over, where you can automate some of those decisions or some of those choices or some of those steps and just focus on the ones that change in the situation. This is a great tool for people who are trying to lose weight because we find that the more decisions you have to make, the less likely you are to make really good choices in food every time. And so if you can automate your decisions and make all of your decisions at once, like food prepping, or pre-planning and putting your meals into your food log before you're going to eat them, like the day before, people are more likely to stay on track. What I find is automating really frees up a lot of time and mental energy. It is insane to me how many lawyers will write the same document multiple times, and I'm like, you have that same paragraph in every document. Please tell me you cut and paste it or you have a template of this document. Most of you do now, which is brilliant. But there are other areas that we can automate that we're just missing. So think for a minute. Are there areas in your practice, in your work or in your practice, if you're a solo practitioner, that you can automate something to make it more streamlined, less time-consuming, and have less of a decision-making process for you in that moment? See if you can come up with a couple. And I will share where most of my clients have come up with. So intake process. I had one client who completely automated his intake process. So he doesn't even talk to a client until they have filled out all of the information that he needs online because it saves him time. He found that he was asking the same questions over and over, and he would get to the end and realize that he couldn't help them, whereas if he'd had that information prior and could just read through it, he could have known in 3 minutes if he could help them or not, or if he needed to refer them out. So he automated his entire intake process. I had a client who automated their onboard process. So all of their training of new employees was done online. They created a program and it was all done online, and every new employee that came to the building had the same process, so they knew the same rules, same regulations, here's where the paper clips are. Everything was automated, so they didn't have to repeat it. And that saved, on average, a day per new hire, and they had approximately 40 new hires a year, so that just saved 40 days. Where else have people? Project management. So a lot of us, how do you organize your projects? Are you a sticky note person, or do you actually have a project management program? Do you have a way to track your clients, the progress of the cases that is automated and systematic, or do you kind of wing it and have a whiteboard? That is a way to automate, because if you can at a glance tell where you are in the process, it becomes more streamlined and there's no redundancy. Routines, ordering. I have clients who have set up all of their ordering for everything from supplies to food, to everything that they need. They've just automated it, which is really easy with Amazon and with Costco delivery, because they found out that they were sending someone and it was taking them a day, a month to go out and buy everything. And now they just click the reorder button. So they've shaved that down to 5 minutes. So where are the inefficiencies in your processes? And where are the redundancies in your processes? And how can you think about automating? And share with your colleagues and friends. Ask where they automate. See if they're willing to share their process. You can share yours. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can share this knowledge. If you are the only one that practices it, it does not make you more competitive. It is better to share this so that we can all be competitive. So here's what we know about automation. Automation will increase your profits because it reduces time, because it also increases efficiency, and it increases accuracy. If you are pre-planning, you're only planning once, so you're reducing the number of times that you can make a mistake, if that makes sense. So you have a worksheet in front of you. I tend to assume that you will fill out the worksheet as we go along if you want to. If you would like to right now, you can list 3 things that you could potentially automate in your practice or day-to-day job. If you can't think of any, see if you can in the future. And also, think about what you already have automated so you can give yourself praise for that. So now we're going to move on and talk about delegating. This is my favorite, and this is one that most of us struggle with massively, because we know that no one can do it as well as we can. We also know that sometimes delegating takes as much time as just doing it ourselves. These are all the excuses that I hear, and they're not wrong. And we also know that if somebody else makes a mistake, you don't want to be on the hook for it. Right? So if you delegate the writing of a brief and they mess it up, you're going to get in trouble for it. So type A people really struggle with delegating. So here's what I want you to do. When you are practicing delegating, I want you to ask yourself three questions. And actually, before you put things on your calendar, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is, does doing this task help me reach my goal? Which means you have to know what your goal is, right? You have to know what your priority is. But will doing this help me get closer to that goal? The second is, do I want to do it? Remember that strengths? Are you good at it? Do you want to do it? So the second question is, do you want to do it? And the third question is, do I need to be the one to do it? Notice where I put the emphasis there. Do I need to be the one? Not does it need to be done, but do I need to be the one to do it? So is there somebody who could do it? Is there somebody who would be better at doing it? Or is there somebody who has more time to do it? If the answer is yes to that, then you don't need to do it. So here's what I found. When people look at their calendars, I ask them to number their activities and tell me if it has 3 yeses, 2 yeses, or 1 yes. And it is horrifyingly surprising how many people have a calendar filled with 1 yes. It should only for sure go on your calendar if you have 3 yeses, if it will help you reach your goal, if you want to do it, and if you need to be the one to do it. Once all of those things are on your calendar, if there's extra space, you can fill them in with 2 yeses. But most of your 2 yeses should be delegated to someone else. And all of the things that just get 1 yes should be delegated. And I know you're thinking, but Carrie, how do I delegate? Because it's not easy. So the first step of delegating is finding a team, right? You can't delegate if you don't have anyone to delegate to. So that means, this is going to be painful, asking for help and finding help. And it can be in the form of an assistant or a paralegal or an associate or a colleague. At home, it could be a spouse. It could be a cleaning person. It could be a PA. It could be an assistant. It could be a nanny, a babysitter. You have to build a team. The people that are the most successful that I work with recognize that they do not have to be the one to do it all. Because if you are going to be the one to do it all, then we are really limited at what we can do. But if you have a team, so you can just focus on what's important and a priority for you, there's really no limit. So we need to build a team. So I'd like you to think for a minute and think about the 3 people that you have that you can delegate to right now. And I don't care if it's better if it's at work because that's what we're talking about, but you can delegate at home too and free up time there. So think about the 3 people you can delegate to, and if you have more than 3, write all of them down, and you can put that on your worksheet. And then think about the tasks you can delegate to those people. What can you give them to do? Is it billable hours? Is it nanny and daycare? Is it driving time? Is it phone calls? Is it scheduling? What are the things that you can delegate? What are the actual tasks? And now I want you to think about the 3 things that you wish you could delegate, but you don't have anyone on your team to delegate to. The 3 things that you just kind of dread doing, that really you avoid doing until the end of the day or sometimes the next day, and they only get done if there's nothing else to do. If you are a person that makes to-do lists, these would be the 3 things that are constantly getting moved to tomorrow's to-do list, and tomorrow's to-do list, and tomorrow's to-do list. Who can you find to do one of those tasks? And now I know a lot of you are thinking a couple of things because I hear this quite often. Carrie, I don't have people I can delegate to. Carrie, I don't have money to pay people I can delegate to. And Carrie, I don't have time to delegate. Here's the tricky thing with delegation. In the beginning, delegation is going to take you more time than just doing it yourself. Odds are, because you have to train someone, you have to learn to trust them, and you have to get your process of delegation going, but you can automate the delegation process too. But in the beginning, it is probably going to add more stress to your life than it will relieve. But I guarantee if you do it, you're going to greatly relieve your stress and increase your efficiency. It's just getting over that hump and being willing to make that challenge for yourself. I have a client right now that I'm working with, and she has struggled with delegating for quite a while, and she's finally doing it now, and she has automated the process so that 2 mornings a week, the first thing she does when she goes in is delegates everything that is potentially delegatable that has come in the last 3 days. So that she is now delegating things instead of the week they're due, a month out, which is brilliant because that also gives her time to review. And she said, Carrie, why didn't we do this when I started with you? And I said, well, if you remember, we talked about it in our very first session, and you weren't ready. She's like, man. She's like, next time you start working with someone, just tell them my story so that they will be ready. Delegation is a single thing that you can do, even beyond automation, in terms of increasing your efficiency and giving you back time. And when I talk about giving you back time, I don't mean, great, now you have more time to work. You can use that time to work if you want, but you can also use that time to work on work-life balance and integration. You can focus on other things that are important to you. You could do a little bit more of that self-care, right? If you're more efficient and you're getting the billable hours, then take care of you too. All right, the final part of the work stress that we're going to talk about reducing is work-life. People like to call it work-life balance. I don't call it balance because you're never balanced. It's always out of whack, right? You're always focused more on one than the other. It just shifts back and forth. I call it work-life integration. Where are your boundaries and where is that fulfillment of life? And I was talking to someone earlier today, and she said, you know what, I was very clear about the job that I chose because I wanted work-life balance, and I knew I couldn't work in the corporate law. So I picked something that was a better fit for me. I have clients come to me all the time and say, Carrie, I have to get out of the field that I'm in because it doesn't give me the work-life balance that I need. What I find is lawyers are notorious because you have billable hours to hit, or if you don't, then you're in your own private practice. So you have expectations that you want to hit. Lawyers are notorious for taking work home, right? If you are billing hundreds of hours a month, odds are you're working at home or you don't go home. You're working in your car on your commutes. You're working at your lunches. You're working at your dinners. You're working at home after dinner, after you put the kids to bed, right? You are constantly working. And so you haven't set any boundaries in life. If life is nothing but work, then work will overtake everything. And it also means that you don't get a chance to de-stress and process, right? If you're constantly going, you're not ever putting a pin in it, pausing, and recovering. And that's what leads to burnout. So here's what I mean when I talk about separate. Everybody has two lives. We have our work life and we have our home life. And we also have priorities. So what is your priority? Is it work? Is it home? Is it equal? And what are the boundaries that you do to protect each life from each other so that one doesn't take over everything, so that one doesn't get all of your time and energy? Remember at the beginning, did I talk about divorce rate for lawyers? Because divorce rate for lawyers is insanely high. And it is because so many lawyers struggle with boundaries that separate their work life and their home life. They give everything they have to work, which is amazing, and it's what got you where you are, but unfortunately not really sustainable for all of us. So the first thing about creating some boundary between work and home is to really sit down and think about what are your priorities, what are your values. If I could list, and if you email me later, I will send you a list of just a brainstorm of different values that people have, but what are your top 3? So what do you spend your most time, energy, and money focusing on? Because a lot of people go, well, my values are health, and my values are family. But they spend 15 minutes a day on their health, and they spend a half an hour a day on their family. So some of our struggle is we have to identify what our values are, what's really important, what's a priority, and then make sure that we're making choices that align with that, right? Because if you come to me and you say, Carrie, my family is the most important thing, my family is really valuable to me, and I don't want to miss out, but then you also tell me that you're working in the office till 10:30 at night, then you are making choices that say that your value is something different than what you're telling me. You have a competing commitment in there. What you are saying is not the same as what you're doing, and we have to align those two. Then you have to set realistic expectations. So if you go home and you work till midnight, you can't say, I'm going to stop at 6 and turn my phone off, because you will freak out and most likely fail. So instead say, I'm going to stop at 11. We'll cycle it back, 11 and then 10. We'll do it in increments so it is easy to chew, it's easy to accomplish. We don't want to set you up for failure, we want to set you up for success. And when you're driving a car, you can't go from 0 to 60 without going 10, 20, 30, right? So one of the things I work with my clients is kind of adjusting those expectations. I will get you to 100%, but we're going to get there 1% at a time, so let's focus on 1% right now. It's not sexy and it's not fun, but that's how we get it done. There was a coach for the British cycling team, and at one point this British cycling team were the worst cycling team in the world. They couldn't win anything. And they had a new coach, and the coach came in and he said, you know what? We're going to focus on getting 1% better. And everyone was like, 1% better? We're not going to win anything. We need to get like 5 times better than we are. And he's like, no, we're going to focus. Everybody go home and come back tomorrow and tell me a change we can make that will make us 1% better. So everybody on the team went home and they all came back with a change that would make it 1% better. One person said we need to adjust the seat this way. And one person said if we adjust the chain this way. And one person said if we eat our meals this way. And so they started to make those 1% changes. The great news about that is it's compounding. It's like interest, right? So if I make a 1% change today and a 1% change tomorrow, tomorrow's change is a little more than what 1% was today. Make sense? And it just adds up. If you can do nothing but make a 1% change every day for the next year, by the end of the year, you're 3 times better than you were in the beginning. So focus on the 1%. It doesn't sound exciting, but it's really efficient and effective. Focus on the one little change that you can make, that you can accomplish, and actually accomplish that. Because those added up will be an entire mountain. So set realistic expectations for yourself. Then set those boundaries and guidelines and exceptions. Actually make a commitment statement to yourself. You can write yourself a contract and sign it, saying, I will not work after this point in time, or Tuesday nights is family night. I will not bring work home. set guidelines for how you're going to make that happen. At 6:30 on Tuesday nights, I'm going to turn my phone off and put it in a drawer. I will also, on my answering machine, give a second number so that if there is a true emergency, which I will determine what a true emergency is and tell everyone, so that they can still get in touch with me. Because that's the biggest fear, right? Is that an emergency will come up and you won't be there to help with the emergency. But usually what they think is an emergency and what you think is an emergency are two very different things, right? The key for this is to come up with exceptions. So, when are you willing to work after 11 at night? Or when are you willing to give up Tuesday night? If you have an emergency injunction hearing the next day, are you okay? It might be worth it. If you have to go to court for an emergency if you're doing divorce, if you're a divorce attorney and you have someone who has an emergency child abuse issue, okay. But you get to decide what is an emergency, and you get to decide what you're going to give your time up for. It is not a given that you'll give up the time. It has to meet certain requirements. And you will decide that before the situation so that if it doesn't meet the criteria, you will say no. You'll say, I'm sorry, that's not an emergency. I can take care of that tomorrow in the office. How many of you just got a knot in your stomach? Did anybody actually gasp out loud? Because when I tell my clients this, they do. They're like, but Carrie, how? I have a client who really struggled with this one, and she just left for a 6-day vacation, and she turned her phone off the whole time. And she said, Carrie, I had so much fun. She said, I was a little nervous the first day or two. She said, but I had told them who they could talk to, and I had backup for when I was gone, and I couldn't do anything about it while I was gone anyway, so I figured they're grown-ups, they can take care of themselves. And that was the first vacation she's had since she opened her practice. Then you need to prepare for violations, because even as good as you are at setting boundaries and setting guidelines and setting exceptions, there are going to be times where you mess up, where you work late anyway, where you miss the family dinner, where you don't get the workout in the gym. So you need to prepare for those violations and figure out what you're going to do when those happens. It's really important for you to bring up that violation and acknowledge it right away. And that means going, I know that I stated that I was not going to work on Tuesdays, and I know that I worked on Tuesday. Then you have to figure out what you're going to change so that when that situation comes up again, you won't make the same decision. Right? You would do this if it were a work situation. If you lost in court, you would sit down at the end and go, here's what I did wrong, here's what I'm going to do differently next time to make it better. We can do the same thing with these boundary violations. The last step, and this is really tricky for a lot of people, including me, is saying no to extras. So when somebody asks you for something, go back to those 3 delegation questions. Is it going to help me reach my goal? Do I want to do it? Do I need to be the one to do it? And if somebody asks you to do something, in your brain go, wait, is it 3 yeses? And if it's not, practice saying no. And there are graceful ways you can say no. You can simply say, I don't think I'm the best candidate for that. I think that there's someone who can handle it better than I can. Or you can say, my schedule at this time is really full. I don't think I can give that the attention that you deserve. If you are not practiced at saying no, you can simply say, you know what, I'm going to look at my calendar and get back to you. So just never say yes in the moment, because once you have time to reflect, you'll usually get the confidence to say no, right? Also, you can send an email and say no in an email, and an email no is a lot easier than a face-to-face no. So practice saying no to the things that are not important to you. If it's not a value to you, if it's not something that's going to help your career, if your career is a value, or something that's going to benefit your family, if your family is a value, or something that's going to benefit your health, if your health is a value. It is okay. Not only is it okay, it is actually a gift to say no. Because I guarantee that there is somebody in the world who will say yes to that wholeheartedly. There is somebody that is something that will help them reach their goal, it's something that they want to do, and it's something that they need to do it. So give them that chance. Don't feel like you're disappointing. Instead, think you're giving somebody else the opportunity to do something they might love to do, because it's not your thing. So, I think if it's all right, we're going to open this up to questions. Do we have any questions yet, Devora? Oh, we do. This is exciting.
Okay, we'll go sort of in order of how questions came in case you run out of time.
Okay.
We had a few questions about the statistic that people today feel stress 10 times more severely than our parents' generation. Mm-hmm. And people were curious about that. How did the number come about? How was that determined? And if you could just speak a little more about that.
So that number was found in Newsweek, and it was a poll of people and their stress levels today, like where they considered themselves on a scale of stress versus people who considered themselves stressed. I think it was at 50 years ago as the people that they asked. And what they found was that it was so much higher now. And a lot of it is because then they asked about what the stressors were, what the causes of stress were. The majority of the causes of stress are globalization and technology and a different style of communication. There are different expectations now, right? 50 years ago, it was a nuclear family, husband and a wife and kids. The wife stayed home. The man was a breadwinner, and that's just the way it was. And our entire culture has shifted from that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't different stressors because of that. And I also think that those numbers are higher because people are more willing to talk about stress now. We're more willing to admit it. You know, people will come and they'll be like, oh, I'm so stressed out. But I also think it's bad because we tend to use our stress as a badge of honor, right? How many times have you heard, oh, I pulled an all-nighter last night. I worked so hard. So-and-so went home at 6 o'clock, but I worked till 11, right? It's a badge of honor and it's this point of pride. And I think when we can shift that, we're going to be happier and healthier.
Well, that's a segue into another question. Someone posed, what about working to create systemic changes in the culture of law rather than accepting that legal practice is inherently abusive for attorneys because of these assumptions and willingness to continue?
Yes, I agree. And that is ultimately what I would love to do. But this is a grassroots campaign. So I have to go pretty much lawyer to lawyer so they can understand where they stand at it, make the changes for themselves, and then demand the change. Because it does no good for me to go to a company and say, look, if you don't change this, your company, your profitability is going to be destroyed. It takes people internally who want that change. I will tell you this, that the next generation that comes out, the millennials and the Gen Z, they highly prioritize work-life balance. Highly. And they are finding that the majority of them are not going into corporate law, or they're lasting about 2 years before they change. And so the question is the culture going to shift for the next generation, or are we going to expect that next generation to shift? Or are we just going to skip a generation of employees? So yeah, I think it does need to be a cultural change. I have a friend who's a lawyer, and it was not a point of pride, but the story, she went to Georgetown, and she told me that there were 5 suicides her freshman year. And I was horrified, because in my entire school of 15,000 people, we didn't have a single suicide the first year. And they had 5 in the freshman class. So I think, yeah, I agree. A cultural shift is massively important.
Is avoidance of negative situations in conflict at times with facing challenges? Those were sort of 2 areas of work.
Oh, that's a really great question. It can be, right? It can be, because we need a certain, I would say this, if it's chronically negative, then it's something to be avoided and not challenged. But if it is just your perspective on it and how you feel about it, then it is a challenge that you should probably approach. But that's a really great question, and it's a question that I struggle with. I just came up on something with my business the other day, and I had a knot in my stomach. I was like, oh, if I just choose not to make this decision, that knot will go away. And I was like, yes, and if I choose not to make this decision, I can't grow. So how do you find that balance between challenging yourself and avoiding negativity? There's a difference between the uncertainty of change and stress, right? You can feel the difference. And it might be that in this moment, you cannot handle the stress of change. It might be that you're coping with so much other stress that the stress of change might be your tipping point. It's really all a balancing act, and it it requires us to be really self-aware, or to have someone else who we are working with who's really self-aware for us. Do we have any more? Oh, good.
Could you please talk about the impact of structural racism and misogyny on stress and on the availability of management tools? Like an intersectionality question.
I have never had that question before. So I'm guessing the question is how sexism and misogyny increase in individual stress, right? This is pretty topical when you think about it, because with the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, there is a lot of cultural shifting going on, and there's a lot of inflexibility to that shift, right? So what happens when there is a cultural shift happening and the people that you work with deny that cultural shift or are unwilling to shift? How does that make you feel as an individual? And I think it's really going to take a lot of education and a lot of empathy, which is an emotional intelligence skill. And I talk about empathy, and most people are like, oh, that's such a soft skill, and why do we need empathy? But empathy is really being able to understand the other person's perspective, and even if you don't agree with it, understanding it, right? And I feel like if we could all approach our coworkers and our culture with a little more empathy, a lot of the issues that we're having right now maybe wouldn't disappear, but would be a lot less, right? If I can shift my mindset from me first to us too, it's going to change things. What was the second part of that question?
Availability of management tools.
So there are so many management tools in terms of education. There are bias workshops, unconscious bias workshops. I give some of those. There are stress workshops that you can bring people in. The problem is just educating on an issue does not change the issue, right? We have to have buy-in from the individuals. So I could go and give a workshop on cultural bias or gender bias or racial bias, but if they don't believe it's an issue, nothing's going to change. So it's my job to show how it impacts them and to see if I can get their buy-in, right? Otherwise, it's just a box they're checking to get some credits. So the question really is not what management and what materials are available. The question is, how can we get people to be willing to actually shift? How can we get them to see the benefit to shifting? How can we get them to see that not shifting is detrimental to their success, their health, their progress, instead of just a maintenance of the status quo? We want people to realize that it is easier to make the change than it is to maintain the status quo. And that's a really difficult proposition.
One person asked, their Holmes-Rahe test
Yes.
result was under 150, but the Williams physical stress test result was 47. Is this common? And they said they felt that the Williams test is more in line with what they experience every day.
Okay, so what that variation showed them is, while they don't have a lot of stressors per se in their life, they don't cope and handle stress really well. It really impacts them negatively. And so I think that that's really great. Here's why. If I'm dealing with somebody with a high Holmes-Rahe number, I'm trying to change situational things in their life. I'm trying to get them to stop choosing stressful activities. Like, I just had a client, she said, okay, I'm having a baby. And I said, great. She's like, and we've decided we want to buy a new house. I said, okay. She's like, and I need a new assistant. And I was like, no. Nope. Pick two of the three. It's like, that's too much, right? It's just too much. So when I'm working with folks with high Holmes-Rahe, I'm really working on reducing that number with situational things. When I'm working with someone with a low Holmes-Rahe number and a high Williams physical stress test, we're really working on the tips that I just shared today. The mindset, the resilience, all of those things. So I think it's great because it's more in your control. It is a lot easier. Some of you are going to disagree, but from a coaching standpoint, it is a lot easier to change you than it is to change the world, right? And that's what your results show, that you need to make some changes with how you handle stress, interpret stress, view stress, and live with stress. But we don't have to change the world around you for that one. So I look at that as a great positive.
What if the person you want to delegate to doesn't want to do the task either? If it's 3 no's for them as well?
That is the tricky part, because we do have that. And I had one client who she said, Carrie, I tried to pass something to my associate, and he was like, I don't want to do it. And she pulled well, that's great, but I pay the check. Right? So there are some things, unfortunately, that even if they don't meet your 3 criteria, you have to do to keep your job, to keep your life. You know, there are things that you do for your spouse that don't hit any of those 3, but you do it because you love your spouse. The goal is just to make those really minimal, right? And if you have someone that you're trying to delegate to and they consistently say no, then maybe that's not part of your delegation team. Maybe you need to find someone who is more enthusiastic about the tasks that you need. Because if they only want to say yes to the things you're saying yes to, and that's not possible, we need tiers of delegation. We need someone who is ecstatic to do it. Like I do not clean my home anymore. It's the best thing I've ever done. And the woman who cleans my home loves cleaning that's her career, it's her job, it's her company. She takes pride in it and she loves it. She really enjoys it. It was torture for me. She's the right person to delegate to. If I tried to delegate that cleaning task to my husband, that would not work. It would be torture for him. So it is finding the right person to marry the right task to. I think we have time for probably one more question.
What if the person who causes you the most stress is a client from whom you can't afford to withdraw as counsel?
So, as a coach, my first question would be, is it true that you can't withdraw, or you believe you can't withdraw? Is it really going to impact your bottom line so much that it's not survivable, or does it just feel like you are? Then the second step is going to be, if it's not, if you need to work with that client, if you absolutely, for your bottom line, have to keep working with that client, recognize that it is still your choice to work with that person. What's causing you the stress is the belief that you don't have a choice, that you have to. So if we go back to that trigger, thought, emotion, right? You're feeling trapped and frustrated because you believe you don't have a choice. And your client's the trigger. So if you can switch that and go, it's not ideal, but I have a choice and I'm choosing to work with her because I value the financial stability of my company, that's going to change your emotions on the process. You're going to talk about what you value instead of feeling trapped, right? So it's really recognizing what you can own and what you can control in that moment and focusing it that way. Because and then see if you can get to the point where you can only work with clients that you love. Bonus, right? Isn't that the ideal for all of us? All right. So thank you, folks, so much for spending the time with me today. We covered a lot about stress. Hopefully it didn't stress you out too much. Hopefully you got the answers you needed. But here's the one thing we do know about stress. Stress is incredibly individual. It is incredibly personal. And it varies in impact and strength. So what is stressful to me might be a cup of tea to you. And what sends you into a panic might be nothing to me. So because stress is so individualized, I wanted to end with an offer for everyone who's watching this. And if you're watching this at a later date, this offer extends to you as well. If you want to have a Stress Master session with me, it is complimentary. We will do 3 things in that session. We can set it up by phone or by Skype. We will talk about your individual stressors and triggers. We will talk about what causes stress in your life and what the impacts of that stress are. And then we can set up a plan for what you need to do to reduce that stress. Because these tools are all tools that you can use, but they're not all going to work for each and every one of you. Everyone's path to less stress is different. But I highly encourage you, if you feel stressed on a daily basis, if stress is impacting your marriage or your work, I would like you to just for a second think about, if you don't do anything about your stress, where are you going to be 3 years from now? What is the compounding interest of the stress on your life, on your marriage, on your relationships, on your productivity? If you don't do anything now, 3 years from now, you're going to be the person that calls me in a panic and says, Carrie, I have to change careers because I can't do this anymore? Or is it something that we can course correct now and get you back on track and have you living a life of contentment and happiness and joy and all of those great feelings that it is possible to be successful and have? So if you would like to have a complimentary session with me, 30 minutes, you can go to the link that is on the slide right now. It is www.rainshadowcoaching.com/book a session. There's a calendar on there. We can have a conversation, and we can get you started on your next step to be stress-free. So here's the conclusion to this whole thing. Stress it's a fact in modern day life. We cannot avoid it. We cannot change it. But the level of which you let stress impact your life is absolutely your choice. You can't control the world around you. Unfortunately, all you can control is how you react to it. So I encourage you to choose to take control in whatever way that you can. Recognize your stress triggers and your causes. Either choose to avoid them or remove them or replace them with healthy activities that are actively going to increase your positivity, that are actively going to increase your productivity, that are actively going to increase your fulfillment, and will actively decrease your stress. I wish you a less stress tomorrow, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me.